All right. Hopefully that gets the sound. Yes, I see all you guys. Boy, I was like, man, the chat is lighting up. How about that? The chat's lighting up. Thankfully, in StreamYard, I can at least change the sound when it doesn't pull my correct microphone at first here. So, anyway, as I was saying, today we did not get a chance on Wednesday because of all the K-State craziness to talk about this story with the NCAA proposal, because I think it will have definite ramifications for the Big 12 and wide-reaching, crazy implications for just college sports in general. And honestly, I think some of it could negatively impact the Big 12, even though it's really like the only way that you can actually go with this thing, with the NCAA staring down the barrel of a lawsuit. It's what you will hear people refer to as the House case, because the last name of one of the plaintiffs there is House. So the NCAA is kind of having to move to a revenue sharing sort of model, and one has now been proposed by Charlie Baker, who's the new president of the NCAA. But it will require schools to dump in a minimum of $30,000 per athlete for half of the athletes at their school, which basically people have ballparked this anywhere. If I've seen like $4.5 to $6 million per school that they would be on the line for. Plus, then you could also pay NIL money directly to players. So for schools that have more money, SEC Big Ten schools, theoretically, then that becomes a much more palatable thing for them to do than the Big 12. So we'll discuss the impact that that's going to have on the league. And actually, I thought that John Wilner did as good a job of anybody is outlining what it's going to mean for places like the Big 12, schools like some of the four new incoming schools to the Big 12 next year, the four corner schools that, of course, the Big 12 picked off. It's a really interesting discussion. So we'll break all of that down and just some of the bigger picture implications for college athletics in general, which would be bad for Olympic sports predominantly here. If this new proposal is passed, which obviously it would have to be passed, and I know there's some thought that it would go through some changes before it could actually be passed. We shall see on that front. Outside of that, as I mentioned, K-State craziness still going on. If people are wanting to talk about that, the president, Richard Linton, on a rampage and behind the scenes doing his best to do damage control and try to change the narrative by lying. So if you guys have questions about that, feel free to let me know. We can talk some Big 12 bowl games. Have not had much of a chance to do that. There's some big transfer portal news. Dylan Gabriel, Blake Shapen. Kansas hires Jeff Grimes, a former Big 12 offensive coordinator at two different schools in Baylor and BYU. And it sounded like he was in line for a potential job at BYU this offseason. So that has a lot of pull within the conference, a lot of interesting tentacles there. Ollie Gordon got a first place Heisman vote, and hey, I don't mean to laugh at Ollie Gordon. He's a tremendous player. I don't know that I would have voted him first place for the Heisman, but he did get a first place Heisman vote and finished top 10. An old friend of ours, Mike Oresko, is retiring. Pour one out for Mike Oresko's career, and we did get a little more insight from the selection committee into why it is that they left Florida State out, which is another thing I would not think is very good for the Big 12 if you dive into that. But anyway, that's what I have for you today. A little bit of a lighter schedule as now we're into the off season. In some ways, not quite as much happening, but you guys know if you want to be a part of the show tonight, you are more than welcome to do so, and you can help dictate the content of the show tonight and make your voice heard. You can do so by clicking the $sign below the chat box. That is how you can submit a super chat. It will attach a donation to your chat, pin it in a separate column for me, and ensures that your voice makes it on the show here tonight. We've got 170 people in the chat already. I can't keep up with everything that's going on, especially when my audio is not working and I see everybody hitting me with the no sound messages, which I do appreciate. Not able to keep up with it. Not able to keep up with it at that point. So again, click the $sign below the chat box to attach a super chat donation to your chat, and it will put it in a separate column for me and ensures that you make it on the show. You can also just click like. I would much appreciate that. Just one click, totally free way to support the channel. Just like the video, leave a comment in the comment section of the video, underneath the video, during or after. Love me, hate me, agree, disagree. All of that stuff is great. And if you're catching this after the fact and you do want to support the channel, it is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo in order to do that. And if you leave me a question or comment there on Venmo, I'll make sure to get to it on the next show. So plenty of ways to help out here on the show tonight. Okay, let's get going because we are going to talk about this NCAA proposal that has been laid out by Charlie Baker. I thought John Wilner, shout out to him, did a really good job of breaking down the nuts and bolts of this and, the impact of what it will have on schools like the schools from the Pac-12 that are going to the Big Ten, and then the schools from the Pac-12 that are going to the Big 12, and how much different the landscape could look for each of those. So here's what John Wilner says. Talking about this deal, he says, the framework sounds intriguing. You allow schools to opt into or out of the new subdivision. So this proposal would create a new subdivision for schools that want to opt in. Now, you would have the choice, but if you're going to opt in, there are minimum financial requirements here. So schools have the choice to opt into or out of this subdivision. It would permit players to be paid directly by the schools for their name, image, and likeness instead of from the booster collectives that have corrupted the recruiting process. So yeah, instead of these collectives would be gone. NIL payments could be made actually by the schools themselves. So it takes away some of the craziness, some of this wild, wild west sort of feel that we're getting with collectives. And, it just varies so greatly by school, by collective, like what is actually happening there, how things operate, how legitimate these things are. It is very, very difficult seemingly to police here at this point. It would allow the schools more control over it as they could do it themselves. Now, the big part of this to me is that it would create educational trust funds for at least half of the school's athletes. Each fund would require annual investments of at least $30,000. And a lot of people have done the math on that. I think I've got something from Ross Dellinger later on in my notes here that I can get to where he calculated it all out. But I've heard anywhere people estimating it being $4.5 to $6 million per school minimum to do this. So half of your school's athletes, at least half of your school's athletes, and it would have to be Title IX compliant, at least half of your school's athletes would get at least $30,000 annually, annual investments of at least $30,000 in this trust. So that's a hefty expense for a lot of schools now, particularly schools that are not going to be a part of the Big Two. And I'm sorry to even use the term Big Two. I know I probably shouldn't around here, but the Big Ten and the SEC. Wilner's article continues here. Baker's proposal would require compliance with Title IX, but is intentionally open-ended. Athletes could use the trust fund cash however they want, whenever they want. Schools could invest as much as they want so long as they met the minimum. And the subdivision could create its own competitive framework with regard to roster sizes and other policies. Roster sizes, I've heard talk of like how many coaches you can have, coaches, analysts, things like that. This would be one of the appealing things, I think, to schools here is if you opt in, instead of the NCAA being able to control a lot of this, you would now have control over this, rules on all of those sorts of things. And Wilner mentions, while Baker used a specific dollar figure of $30,000, the proposal was light on details. He termed it a conversation starter. Here's a quote from Brett Yormark. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark called it, quote, directionally correct. I assume that means just like moving in the right direction. Like maybe this isn't a perfect proposal, but it is moving in the direction that everything needs to go, which I generally would agree with that, especially from the pressure that they're getting from the court, where if they lose this house case in court, they were going to have to revenue share with student athletes anyway. And this is in essence revenue sharing without it outright being called revenue sharing, because the only way that you're getting the money to make all these payments, the $30,000, the NIL stuff is going to be from the revenue, obviously, that you are pulling in. Now here comes the hard part. Ramming a revolutionary proposal through the NCAA's labyrinth legislative process that features multiple divisions, hundreds of committees, and a membership that includes both Alabama and Alabama A&M. How many of the 133 major college football schools would opt into the new subdivision? The investment required would be substantial. Okay, actually, I forgot that Wilner calculated this out for us here. For many universities, paying half the athletes $30,000 becomes a $6 million budget hit. And that's the minimum. There's no cap. Not like the kids say it. All right. There's no cap. So some schools could pay double or triple the proposed amount. And the NIL compensation piece, it's easy to see the cost zooming past $10 million annually. Yeah, definitely easy to see that. If you're going to be paying your student athletes the NIL money and you're going to be having to do whatever, at minimum $6 million for that trust, yes, you're probably looking at double-digit $1 million annually. And think about it. I mean, we're talking about the Big 12 here making $32 million a year from the TV deal. I mean, that's, about 33% of your TV revenue money potentially having to go to all of this. Now, boosters could be funding a lot of the NIL stuff, I suppose. But the point still stands. If you are making then, say, $60 or $70 million a year from TV, it's a place where you have quite a hefty advantage in terms of having to pay your athletes in this new subdivision. And so I found it very interesting and honestly maybe a little staggering and concerning the way that Wilner started to break this down, because he says within the Pac-12 footprint, USC, Oregon, and Washington would opt in. They have the resources, brand names, and fan passion to make subdivision membership a community imperative. Others would join as well, but to what degree? Could schools with budget issues, and he lists Arizona, Cal, UCLA, Oregon State, and Washington State, offer competitive investments in trust funds? None of those schools obviously are coming to the Big 12, but they are schools that have had a lot of financial issues. We've seen that pretty well documented. UCLA and Cal, the whole Cal subsidy thing, because Cal is in so much trouble right now. UCLA going to the Big 10. We've seen it with Arizona. Certainly Oregon State and Washington State right now are staring down the barrel of some real financial troubles. Would they be able to afford this? Particularly like Washington State and Oregon State. That seems to be a really tough putt based on all of the media revenue that they are going to be losing now. Say that's even going to be generously close to like $10 million a year in whatever version of the Mountain West kind of conference that they're going to be in long term moving forward. That's really tough. That's really tough all of a sudden. But Wilner even questions, would Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado do the same? I guess, and sorry, Arizona. I just said nobody in this group is coming to the Big 12. Arizona is coming to the Big 12. I can confirm. I can report that. So my bad on being an idiot there. Would Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado do the same? The Utes in particular have always managed their money well. How would they define a reasonable investment level? But the subdivision would require more than a mammoth cash outlay. It demands a philosophical shift. Would the Pac-12 schools be willing to join the world of uncapped payments to athletes? Is Stanford ready to take that step? Is Cal? Yeah, look, that's obviously a very Pac-12 centric problem. You're not going to have to worry about that in the Big 12. The desire is certainly there. The want is certainly there to continue to play with the big boys here in said new subdivision. It's just going to be all a financial question. Do you have the money to actually do that? The interesting thing to me here is going to be, we have seen all the talk for so long. Some people were retweeting an Andy Staples tweet, now the main national guy at On3, from back, I think it was in the offseason, when he was talking about the Northwestern job when you had all the Pat Fitzgerald stuff going down. And he was saying, like, look out, like Big 12 schools like KU, K-State with Lance Leipold, Chris Kleiman, Northwestern could come in and poach your coach, even though it's not nearly as prestigious of a job, but they've got that Big 10 money. They've got that Big 10 money. They can come in and poach your coach. Over the offseason, when Purdue was looking for a coach, there were hot boards talking about Chris Kleiman there. And I just kind of rolled my eyes because, yes, they do have more money here, but it is not enough money yet to the point where we have seen much of the forecasted gloom and doom actually come to fruition. Because to me, that was one of the big concerns about the growing TV money disparity here, is that just paying coaches, retaining coaches would become much more difficult. Now, I guess you could argue we have seen it in the Big 12 with like coordinators. Colin Klein and Andy Kotelnicki are both going to get substantial raises. Colin Klein, I think over a 100% raise by the time it's all said and done in College Station. Kotelnicki got a massive raise too, although I don't know that I think Kansas came close at least to matching the dollar value there. But if you wanted to at least make that argument, I would listen to it, that like coordinators perhaps have been a little tougher to hang on to because of how much money those schools can throw at them. But the head coaching thing hasn't really seemingly come to fruition much, at least yet for me. So I guess it is fair to raise some level of skepticism here to say, well, okay, so it makes sense. They're going to have more money. And if you can pay athletes an uncapped amount here and there's a minimum, theoretically, these schools will be able to offer the athletes a lot more. But how much will that really matter? They can basically, a lot of those schools pay them more now because of NIL collectives, depending on where you're at and how much money your alumni base has and all of that. Texas A&M bought a number one recruiting class, for instance, a couple of years ago for Jimbo. So you could look at it and say, hey, it's probably not going to change that much. But I do have concern. I do have concern about where this goes long term for it, because the coaching thing, if coaches are older, wiser, much more able to step back and evaluate all the different nuances of their situation, not just, hey, massive amount of money being thrown in front of my face. Do I really want to go to Northwestern to make an extra $2-3 million a year as opposed to stay at K-State or Kansas right now, where I have a more high-profile football program and access to a 12-team playoff in a new 12-team playoff world? But if it's coming down to like, hey, the kid just knows, right? Like right now, kids are having to sniff around, try and figure out what their NIL value is, and there's tampering and all that stuff going on. But it's at least a little murkier and a little more difficult. But if a kid just knows, like, hey, it's public, it's out there. If I transfer to Texas A&M, I know that they're giving me a minimum of $90 million a year instead of just $30 million. They're going to go ahead and step that up. And so I know immediately I'm going to be making 200% what I was making this year with 90 grand as opposed to 30. Now I'm just pulling numbers completely out of thin air. I'm pulling a school completely out of thin air there, but that's the type of example that I feel is appropriate to use here. How much could that hurt schools in the Big 12 and the ACC as opposed to everybody who's in the Big 10 and the SEC and the extra TV money that they are going to have? I still think there's a chance it could wind up kind of like what we have right now with the coaching aspect of this, where it won't have as much of an impact as perhaps a doomsday scenario would have you believe here. And Brett Yormark, I mean, that quote that he had where he basically said moving in the right direction, as I paraphrased there, didn't seem like he was too incredibly bothered by it, at least right now. So I hope that's just a more pessimistic view of it. But this to me would be a bigger threat than the coaching stuff that we're having right now. Let me finish off the John Wilner article here for you. He says, longtime NCAA watchers wondered if the autonomy provided by Baker's subdivision might delay the in-game Mini-4C, with the heavyweight football programs breaking away from the NCAA in the 2030s to create their own league, a mini NFL. But there's another possible outcome. The subdivisions expedite the formation of a super league by adding stress to the system and forcing universities of higher education to define their financial and institutional relationships with athletes. Also, Baker's proposal is unlikely to eliminate the legal challenges facing the NCAA, with the House case atop the list of existential threats. So I mentioned that House case earlier. It's about Grant House, former Arizona State swimmer. He's named in the plaintiff in a massive class action suit against the NCAA, seeking NIL back payments, so money for all the athletes who graduated before 2021 when NIL became a thing, saying basically we should have had the same access to this that everybody does now. And the damages could carry an 8-figure costs. The revenue sharing piece will divert millions annually in future media dollars from the schools to the athletes. If the schools must pay into the trust funds outlined by Baker and share media revenue with athletes, as dictated by a loss in the House case, the resulting economic pressures could hasten the arrival of a super league. So, okay, here you go. If this comes into fruition, the Baker plan, you'd be paying 30 grand for the trust funds for half of your athletes. And then on top of that, you could also lose this House case, which would mean that revenue sharing, media revenue would have to be shared all of a sudden. And that would create a bunch of economic pressure on all these different schools. So then do the big boys break off and say, hey, 10 to 20 of us have the means to actually do this and do this right now with all the pressures that we're facing? We'll just form our own league and do it that way, and everybody else can kind of fend for themselves. Wilner says the hotline attempts to view the subdivision proposal through the same lens used for other earth-moving developments across college sports. How will it be received in Columbus, Ann Arbor, and South Bend? Because the future of 2,000 schools across all NCAA divisions, especially the 100-something athletic departments in FBS, hinges on decisions made in coming years by the handful of blue bloods at the very top of the Power 5 hierarchy. He ends with this, and it's a pretty accurate statement. In reality, the 8 to 10 schools that drive billion-dollar media deals are subsidizing everyone else. As changes take root and costs rise, so will the need for cash and a reluctance to share their revenue with the remainder of FBS, Division I, and the entire NCAA. So that's another part of this. The one piece is, hey, does the money disparity here start to show up even more when you're being able to pay athletes more directly and you're having to pay at least 50% of your athletes that 30 grand per year? The other thing is, does that start to push this closer to a super league, because there's just going to be so much financial pressure on all these different schools to be able to produce? So definitely things to monitor. And I don't think this is like a for sure thing going to happen tomorrow. But it is at least something that seems to be a starting point. I know Charlie Baker considered it a conversation starter. I saw that point made a couple of times. So you're probably going to see this get morphed and changed. Greg Sankey was being a little whiny about it and saying like, hey, this was never actually run past the commissioners. So maybe Sankey has something that he would like to change or tweak with this. I'm sure there will be a lot of people that have input and weigh in on this. But this is pretty big, pretty revolutionary. And in light of that lawsuit, seems like something that is probably going to stick around. I don't think that is going to be something that will go away. I think you're going to see some form of this eventually. Just what the final form is, we don't know quite yet. So it's something you probably need to start wrapping your head around and getting used to as we face this ever-changing world of college athletics right now. This was much different than what we typically see from the NCAA. This was a pretty groundbreaking sort of proposal. And finally, years, perhaps decades too late, the NCAA trying to do something radical as far as change goes. But they're basically just being forced into it here. You're essentially getting pay for play. This is a pseudo way around all of that without fundamentally saying like, hey, we're literally paying the athletes, but you are basically paying the athletes with this. And we'll see. The other thing that would be interesting is, as I glance down here, is like how many schools that are in a Power 4 conference right now would really struggle with this and potentially not want to opt in. Would there be some? And another point that I know, I was listening to the Yahoo College Football podcast, and they talked a lot about this. This could be bad for Olympic sports, because if you're having to pay 50% of your athletes, theoretically you would want to get less athletes there. It's going to lower the cost. So then maybe you start cutting some Olympic sports to be able to make that pool of money that you're going to have to pay out go down. And that honestly is a pretty sad thing. I'll be honest, it's not something that is going to affect me a ton, but I understand the value of it being there in the NCAA, and that sucks if that's really going to start to go away and you're going to lose a lot of opportunities for kids to be playing these Olympic sports. But with the rise of football and the media contracts and all that, it does seem like this is pretty much the way that you have to go. So anyway, I'm happy to take any questions or comments you guys have about it. Click the $ below the chat box in order to do that, to send me a super chat. I see the super chats in here, and I will get to them now. Appreciate all of you guys. Joshua, what's up, Joshua? Thank you for being here. I see you've got another one coming here in just a second, Joshua. I will get to that momentarily, but appreciate your support of the channel, my friend. Browns and Beers, what's up, Browns and Beers? Always grateful to see you here and grateful for your support of the channel. Browns and Beers says, missed the Wednesday show, but all I'll say is that when it feels like the sky is falling for your college programs, just know it feels like it's falling at a dozen other places as well. Cincy sucks. Wow, Cincy taking strays, man. Browns and Beers coming after Cincy. Someone needs to defend the honor of the Bearcats. Someone needs to defend the honor of the Bearcats. I'm sorry, Zach. My boy Zach, I just had to read it. Don't blame me. But Browns and Beers, you are correct. And I'm trying to take some solace in the fact that, I had Oklahoma State fan or two or three at least weighing in on the show the other night, saying like, hey man, we thought the sky was totally falling last offseason for Oklahoma State football. And look what happened. You made the Big 12 championship game, 9-win season. And that is very true. National award winner in Ollie Gordon, who wins the Doak Walker Award. So some hardware brought home by Oklahoma State this year. Sincerely my hope. And for football, I mean, I do think there's definite hope there in the short term. I mean, the long-term concerns at K-State right now are you have a meddling president who has a Napoleon complex and is not afraid to lie about anything to get his way. Will that drive out your athletic director, who in turn is pretty tied to the football coach? And then look, I mean, I think we've already seen where the concern is going to come in hanging on to a basketball coach that has already been meddled with the way that he has by the university president. So there are some real big picture concerns at K-State. We'll see if anything comes of that. I know there are a lot of people behind the scenes who are very upset. There are also those who have been caught in the web of lies from Richard Linton that he is trying to spread behind closed doors. So we'll see. It's not something that makes me feel good long term. But for K-State short term, like, look, I think Connor Riley is going to get an opportunity to be the offensive coordinator for the bowl game, is what it sounds like. He'll get a shot there. Avery Johnson did, since I last spoke to you, more or less confirm he'll be around for the bowl game at the very least, with the video that K-State put out about him changing numbers. He does not seem to be going anywhere right now, which is very good, because that was the absolute doomsday scenario. So at least as far as football goes, yes, I have backed off the ledge a little bit there. And I know there are plenty of issues that other schools around the country are having. So thank you for the perspective, Browns and Beers. Thank you for the perspective. Outlaw of College Football. What's up, Outlaw of College Football? Thank you for being here. Appreciate you, my friend. Outlaw of College Football says, we are going to microcosm down to about the top 60 to 72 teams, and the rest will reform a Division I AA. Schools like West Virginia could finally win a title, maybe. Boy, is that supposed to be a shot at West Virginia, calling them like a 1AA there? If it's going to be 60 to 72, West Virginia would certainly be in that group, right? And 60 to 72, that I think is like the question here. Would there be 60 to 72 schools that would opt into this, if this is what you're going to have to do, if you're going to have to pay $6 million a year minimum to be a part of this because of the $30,000 that you have to give half of your athletes? I don't know. And that becomes a real issue for schools that have a bigger brand, are still in bigger conferences, but do have the legitimate financial issues going on within their athletic departments. Like, if they're already hurting, is this something that could really force their hand? I think a lot of those schools they would find a way, right? Like that would be something that would get boosters' attention, to be able to have people step up with money, is like, hey, this is a legit existential threat for whatever school athletics. So I would think that they would get enough of a response to do that. And with some of these things, like I've already mentioned, sometimes it hasn't affected the game quite as much as you think it might be, though. We are very much getting into a new era starting next year. Like, we'll start to see things, I think, change pretty rapidly, and change come in waves very quickly starting next year, because everything will look so much different, with all the major tectonic plates shifting, the Pac-12 exploding, the Big 12 losing Texas and Oklahoma, the new look Big 10. It's going to all start to look and feel very different beginning next year. And I'm not sure anybody totally knows what it's going to look like when everything settles. So keep your eye on that. But yeah, I definitely have thought before, like, that felt like eventually where it was going, Outlaw of College Football. You'd get basically these top 4 or 5 conferences all together to break free, be governed by different rules. And this is in essence what that proposal is just with the minimum threshold for money. That's the part that brings into me a little bit of question as to who all will be able to truly afford that. All right, Joshua, appreciate you, man. Joshua asks, any teams you could see in the future joining the Big 12 from the ACC, anywhere else? But yeah, I know the ACC talk has started to heat up a little bit more now. I think my answer has always been, from the ACC, you'd be looking at like the Louisville Pitts of the world, potentially like Virginia Tech, maybe Duke, especially with Brett Yormark's eye on basketball. If Duke in any way became available, I would think that's something that he would have a lot of interest in. You are most likely looking at Miami, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia, all going off to the Big Ten and or SEC. And I know there's even been talk about, like, would Virginia Tech go, maybe even like NC State? I remember that conversation about the Board of Regents over there and how that would go with North Carolina and NC State, if they would stay tied together or not. But yeah, I think that kind of middle tier of the ACC is what you would really be looking at. If we're talking about all sports, Gonzaga always seems to be on the back burner for basketball, hanging out there as a possibility. I guess if you wanted to submit UConn too, because we know that Brett Yormark has had some legit interest there, but they've been having a bad football season this year, right? Let's see. UConn Huskies, for the first time, checking UConn's football season. I say like they've been having. It's over. They were 3-9. Wins over Rice, Sacred Heart, and UMass. So yeah, it does not seem like that's really moving in the right direction. But yeah, I feel like that's the main thing to focus on right now, is what happens with the ACC. We had all those threats from Florida State. We've heard about Clemson, North Carolina, lots of unrest there. If that were to implode, can you snatch up the middle tier of the ACC? John Waffle H2P. Hail to Pitt here. All right. We got a Pitt fan in the house. Not sure how our West Virginia folks are going to take to that, but he says, I find this hilarious. College football is not about the Iowa States and K-States of the world. If the Big 12 was a serious conference, they would kick out the dead weight. Oh, boy. All right. Well, you just paid $10 to get slaughtered here, my friend, because you're a Pitt fan. You're a Pitt fan. Like, if you're going to come in with that take, like change the logo to Florida State or something. I mean, sheesh, like the ACC, you talk about dead weight. Wake Forest, Boston College, Pitt. Like what? I mean, the ACC has some crap in it, my friend. Wow, that is a ballsy take. I'm not sure that I've seen a dumber take in here in a long time as a Pitt fan to say, hey, college football is not about the Iowa States and Kansas States of the world. Let's go. You know, let's have some fun here. Pitt football year by year. Pitt football year by year. The mighty Pitt Panthers this year were 3-9. They were 9-4 last year, 11-3 the year before that. So, hey, nice couple of years back to back for Pitt, but then 6-5, 8-5, 7-7. Sheesh. 5-7, 8-5, 8-5, 6-7, 7-6. That's the ACC era for Pitt. I mean, what you're looking at there is that Pitt is a 7-5 program, basically. Doing some rough math there, 7-5 program in the ACC. I don't know that a 7-5 program in the ACC can come in here throwing a bunch of stones out of that glass house. And, you know, if we're talking about teams being poor, how's Jordan Addison doing? How'd that Jordan Addison thing go? You know, USC was just able to come in and boop, pluck him away, you know, throw a little bit of money out there, and good old hail to Pitt couldn't keep him around. So, you know, that's too bad. It's too bad that a big boy and a massive titan of the college football world like Pitt was not able to pay enough to keep Jordan Addison around. That's rough. That's rough. But hey, the good news is, John, the good news is you've got Pat Narduzzi as your coach. And if there is one guy that screams modern college football and being able to keep pace in modern college football and knows how the game is played these days and embraces everything you need to embrace to be successful in 2023 in an ever-changing world, it is Pat Narduzzi. I tell you what, that is the guy that I think of when I think of being on the cutting edge in college football. So I would not be possibly more thrilled, could not possibly be more thrilled than if I were a Pitt fan and my head coach were Pat Narduzzi moving forward off of this 3-9 season, building a ton of momentum. Didn't you lost to Cincy this year, for Christ's sake, right? Like, Cincy, man. Here we go, Pitt 2023. It's like I remember watching that game earlier this year on the CW. You know, I mean, you're losing games to Cincy on the CW, home games to Cincy on the CW. Pitt's out here losing home games to Cincy on the CW in the year of our Lord 2023, and has the audacity to come out here and say, hey, it's not about the Iowa States and Kansas States of the world. My friend, Iowa State and Kansas State would have rocked the Pitt Panthers into another conference this year had they actually played. So, oh boy. Oh, we got another one. Paying $15 to get owned. Actually, Pitt averages about 2 million viewers. Cite your source. Cite your source, MFer. Cite your source, dude. Get out of here with that garbage. Pitt averages 2 million viewers a week. I'm sure. Well, I'm sure glad, John, that 2 million people then every single week could watch Pitt fart out losses. I'm sure that was great for everybody, and they feel very valued with the money that they got out of that. They got their money's worth, put it that way. Their money's worth out of that CW subscription. And hey, you can just roll right into Gilmore Girls after that on the CW too. So boy, thanks for the laugh, man. That provided some nice entertainment here in the middle of the chat. Pitt fan, man. Speaking of teams that would just demolish Pitt, here's an Arizona fan. What's up, Bear Down Cats? Bear down, John. Hey, I'm bearing down. Okay, I'm bearing down. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support of the channel. Would it benefit the Big 12 and ACC to strike first and form a super league? How does the Big 12 protect its basketball superiority? I know that is another thing that has generated some conversation here lately. Big 12, ACC, perhaps starting up some conversations about how they could partner and make things as good as possible for each other. I don't know, man. That's a tough one. That seems complicated. It does feel like you're basically eventually heading toward some kind of a partnership anyway. It would just be after the top crust of the ACC departs. So I don't know how you would sell that to like the top part of the ACC that wants to leave some sort of like legitimate merger with the Big 12 right now. But if you could pull together and make it some sort of like scheduling agreement, and I know, like, doesn't that seem kind of like what the alliance was? I mean, hey, I guess something sort of along those lines. Maybe you could figure something like that out. I think it's worth I'll put it this way. It's worth talking things out with the ACC right now and seeing, are there things we can do to increase the value for each other here that could be mutually beneficial? Because now with the Pac-12 gone, you've got both of those conferences in similar positions with the Big 12 and the ACC in terms of their hierarchy in the college football world, because the ACC is definitely looking at losing the very top brands there. So I would be open to exploring whatever you can, but I also do feel like we've gone down that road. The alliance was a thing that happened, but we never saw anything really substantial or tangible come of it. It didn't seem to make like a real legitimate impact on anything other than just like some grandstanding in a press conference once upon a time. And by that, I mean a digital Zoom press conference that was still one of the most awkward things that I remember seeing from this entire conference realignment process we've all been through over the last couple of years. So I guess that would be my take on it right now. Bear down cats. But I should probably give that some more thought, poke around a little bit more on some of that with the Big 12 and the ACC. Jay Strummer, thank you for the support, Jay Strummer. I appreciate it. Jay Strummer, I see you've got something else coming too, Jay Strummer. I promise I will get to that in just a moment. Just going to make sure that I hit all of these in the correct order. So we go to Matthew next. Matthew, I appreciate you, Matthew. Thank you very much for being here. Matthew says college football is NFL light is a sad development. Would prefer players self-select to go straight to a D league or minor league like baseball. Well, yeah, if that is the eventual outcome of all of this, it's going to be sad for everybody involved, because that loses everything really that makes college football great. The different colloquialisms locally everywhere, different environments, atmospheres, home crowds, traditions, rivalries, things that you hate about other schools, all the stuff that just makes college football so damn unique. Players peeing in the end zone in Ole Miss, Mississippi State to decide outcomes of games. Players throwing shoes, LSU, Florida to decide outcomes of games. These are the things that make us love college football. And if we are going to miss that because it turns into, in essence, an NFL light and a developmental league, the NFL D League, that would really suck. And that's probably the point where you hit the lack of returns on your investment for everybody that's pouring into these super leagues and pushing further and further toward that. Like eventually that'll start to get old. You'll lose interest from a lot of pieces of the country, and you just get diminishing returns on what you've done to try and consolidate all this power at the top of the sport. So I definitely do agree with you on that. I guess if you're saying would prefer players self-select to go straight to the D League or minor league like baseball, yeah. And then you could just still play college football with whoever's left. I mean, you would be losing out on some of the best players, best prospects to be in there. But I can see the point that you're making there too. At least the guys that are going to be there, would theoretically want to be there a little bit more, not be so sidetracked by all that. I can understand the point that you're making there, Matthew. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan, thank you. Always great to see you, my friend. Alan wants to talk about Jeff Grimes. I'm glad that you want to talk about Jeff Grimes because Mr. Linton, Dick Linton, emphasis on the first name. Okay, not sure about the Grimes hire. What do you think? I think Jeff Grimes it's a fascinating hire. I will put it that way. It's a fascinating hire because to me, he becomes kind of like they talk about the Rorschach test, like the ink blot test, where you show two different people the same splotches of ink on a piece of paper and ask them to describe what it is that they see, and you will see something totally different. I've heard from BYU folks who say, hey, 2019, he actually had some of the play calling duties stripped and the offense got better after that. He was then fired, obviously, this year at Baylor, where things were very, very bad. I've seen that kind of negative outlook here on Jeff Grimes. But he also has been a finalist for the Broyles Award, given to the best assistant coach in college football. He has run the offense at BYU. with Zach Wilson, right? If I have that correctly, and did some nice things at BYU, and then was hired again at Baylor. So like 2 other Big 12 schools have deemed him good enough to be an offensive coordinator for them. And he seemed like a fairly sought after commodity this offseason. I'm reading this from the Desert News. It says Grimes had been a target for open positions on the offensive staff at BYU. The hire of Grimes, who previously coached at BYU 2 other times, wasn't official, however. And that was, quote, because of a few details that needed to be ironed out regarding his responsibilities and title. So it sounds like he came close to being hired at BYU, but it was going to be a matter of like what his title and actual responsibilities would be there. So would that have been offensive coordinator? Would it have been that they're trying to negotiate something more than OC? I don't know. But if you're saying like that's a guy that may or may not have been the OC at BYU or something close to it, then, that seems like a fairly solid hire. But it is hard to kind of wipe off mentally some of the stink of what Baylor was this year. And I know Baylor fans certainly were not happy with him. They were only ahead of Houston, Iowa State, and BYU statistically in offense this year in the Big 12. But Grimes was one of 5 finalists for the Broyles Award in 2021. So he's a name. And I forgot he was in the running for the head coaching job at UTEP too. So he got a little bit of run for a head coaching gig this offseason, obviously at a much lower level. So I think it's fine. Like, I think it seems solid, high risk, high reward based on what his resume has been, but a fascinating one for Lance Leipold. And I saw that he said that there was, they had invited him, I think, to a bowl practice or something like that. And that's where the conversation actually started. So the fact that Kansas is able to pull somebody that was almost in the bag at BYU to get hired does tell you a little something about where the Kansas football program has ascended to, and also what they have coming back. I think that's got to be a big part of it too, that Grimes will look at it and say like, hey, I'm going to have some really nice pieces to work with here. Maybe it includes Devin Neal, maybe it doesn't. We'll see what he does with the NFL draft. But either way, Jalen Daniels, some pretty good receivers, offensive line that seemed to get a lot better. I think there's a lot in place there if you wanted to come take over as the offensive coordinator at Kansas. Now, any chance that Richard Linton is forced out at K-State? Boy, it's like the $1 million question. I mean, I'm not overly optimistic about that because that's hard to do. He was just hired within the last year. So you're talking about the Board of Regents admitting that they made a big mistake very quickly into this. Board of Regents doesn't seem like a thing that moves fast on anything at all. Richard Linton is still trying somewhat successfully to do damage control and lie to people and say that the decision was unanimous from Jerome Tang, Gene Taylor, and he to not allow Naquan Tomlin to still play basketball at K-State. He's also trying to say that the plan the entire time was to let him graduate and then send him on his way. I mean, that is ludicrous. Ludicrous can emphatically confirm that is not correct, but that is what he is telling people and trying to convince people with money that is the case. So stay tuned. I mean, I think there are some things happening behind the scenes, but am I overly optimistic that will happen? No, I am not. I am unfortunately not overly optimistic about that, but we'll see. We'll see. It was a good B-ball win over Mizzou for Kansas, 3-0 against the SEC. Mizzou actually looked better than I thought. I only watched most of the first half of that game, but they impressed me early on in hanging tough. Certainly a lot better than last year's effort. And Allen finishes by saying, always respected K-State and other Big 12 fan bases. Not so much for Mizzou. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen. Well, Allen, right now I'm so angry at the university president at K-State and just kind of disgusted by everything that has happened there that it's hard for me to get back into that mindset that I was in September when I was going to war with Mizzou fans. But I can tell you that I did not like them then. I certainly did not like them then and had a pretty miserable experience in Columbia. So I can get on board with that. But appreciate it, Alan. Thank you for being here and your support of the channel as always. Jay Strummer. What's up, Jay Strummer? Jay Strummer, Big 12, ACC, and any basketball schools not in the conferences should join and refuse to play basketball with the SEC and the Big 10. You might just need them, though, right? You might need them for the net. You might need them for, moving up your Ken Palm. You might need them for better non-conference basketball schedules. I guess if you're going to say you just run through the ACC, they run through The Big 12, create a super conference. You're only playing teams from there. I don't know. I feel like you'd still need a little bit of that juice. And I guess the real point would be, what does that really do? You know, what does that really do? It's not, if the Big Ten and the SEC then just have to play each other. I mean, the SEC's been getting better and better in basketball, and the Big Ten certainly has a lot of crap there, but it's not total garbage by any stretch of the imagination in hoops. I think they'd be okay. Like they'll be fine. They're still going to make a ton of money from their TV contracts that are already locked in for football and basketball. So I understand the idea. I understand the thought. I'm not sure how productive it would really be, other than, I guess, if you just want to say it would be some sort of symbolic thing for the league to do to lock them out of basketball. I have a hard time seeing that being like something that's really, really legitimately effective. But I'm all for thinking creatively, and I'm all for thinking, honestly, I have to admit, I mean, I'm a guy that, like, I'm all for thinking vindictively. So thinking vindictively there, I can appreciate that, Jay Strummer. I certainly can. Daniel, what's up, Daniel? Daniel, Cat Fan in Huskerland, aka Daniel Osborne. Always appreciate your support here of the channel, my friend. Daniel says, so how about the Cats men's and women's basketball teams this weekend? Pretty impressive performances by both teams. Also, what did you make of Coach Tang's message to the fans? Wish you the best, and go Cats. All right. Well, yes, on the court, great stuff. That K-State women's basketball team's a legitimately very, very good team. I mean, that's the best K-State women's basketball team I can remember, at least what it looks like right now, since like Nicole Oldie, Kendra Wecker, back in those early 2000s days. So yeah, they're excellent. The men, with all the distractions going on, go down to LSU and win by 15 in a game where they were 2.5-point underdogs. It's a hell of a win. It's a hell of a performance. And a 2-0 week with all these distractions going on to beat Villanova and then win at LSU. It has me feeling a lot better. This team seems to be coming along. Arthur Kaluma is turning into a dude. Tyler Perry is hitting big shots. Cam Carter has been a legitimate dude this entire year. Sure would be nice if they had a 6'10" pogo stick with crazy length in the middle that could not only be really difficult defensively, but also a matchup nightmare offensively and create more open looks for everybody. But, instead he'll be playing maybe somewhere else in the Big 12 for the second semester, because we've got the president from old school. We've got Jeremy Piven from old school running the university. I digress anyway. What did I make of Coach Tang's message to the fans? Well, I thought it was perfect, but come to find out, I would tell you, I believe that it was pressured. Oh, the right way to phrase this. I don't think someone said, hey, directly, you've got to do a video. I think the president told Gene Taylor and Jerome Tang, you guys need to fix this. The fans are coming after me with pitchforks. You guys need to fix this. And they figured that was the best way to do it. And it was a hell of an idea, because it basically worked to calm everybody down for about 12 hours until the president then let his ego get in the way and was not happy enough with how Tang's message concerned him. Didn't mention him by name, didn't mention university leadership, didn't say, hey, we were all unified in a decision. And I think that's why he then put out the release the next day, the letter the next day, which was just a bumbling mess, an attempt to throw Naquan Tomlin under the bus by mentioning the second incident, and got everybody all fired up again, made him look bad, because the original press release that was sent out even before the Tang video said this will be the only comment from K-State or Kansas State athletics. And then you got a video from Tang to follow, and then you got a letter from Richard Linton himself. So that made it blatantly obvious to everybody that this is a clown show, the way things are being run. So that's what I think. I mean, look, Tang's great, and the message was great, but it doesn't make me feel great when I don't think that was necessarily what he wanted to do. Now, he made the message very genuine, and he is excellent at doing that. There's nobody better than that. He is a true leader and not somebody that is a wannabe dictator. So that's the difference between him and Richard Linton. But even when Tang did something to really help out, good old Dick had to step in it and get in the way anyway. So that's what I think about Jerome Tang's message to the fans. Well, boy, John says, just sent you my source via X. Enjoy. All right, let's learn about all these Pitt Panthers. See if I can find it here. Learn about all these Pitt Panthers. I don't know. I'm not seeing it in the mentions. We got it in the DMs, maybe. Not seeing it in the DMs either. So I'm just I'm not seeing it right now. My apologies if I'm just missing it somehow, but I am not seeing anything on good old X. So my apologies. I guess we'll have to just take Mr. John Waffle Hill to Pitt's word for it that Pitt averages 2 million viewers per game, and America loves watching the Pittsburgh football Panthers play a little football. Calico, what's up, Calico? Calico, hi, John. Did you see the story about Klein telling A&M that he wouldn't poach Avery? Hoping if you had insight on that and solutions to poaching. Well, I appreciate the support, Calico. I've got no solutions really to poaching. I mean, I think that's just going to happen no matter what you try and do. And that goes for like poaching and or tampering. You're just always going to have that going. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that the story, it was from Heartland College Sports. It was referencing Kevin Keatsman quote. He used to be a prominent sports talk host in Kansas City. He now just does a podcast. I will just say this. I took that story and I sent it to my main Colin Klein source, who was dynamite for me the 12 hours before the Texas A&M news became official. And he said, like, no, I don't really think that necessarily happened, that Texas A&M was telling him, hey, we want you to bring Avery Johnson. And Colin said, no, I'm going to tell him to stay here. Maybe it did. My source kind of brushed that off. So that's really the only insight that I can provide to you as far as that goes. I mean, look, Avery is not following him, at least as of right now. It would take something changing dramatically after the bowl game for that to actually happen. So perhaps that was a part of the conversation. I don't know. I can understand why people would think that might have been something Colin felt was in his best interest, just to not totally decleat the program that he's leaving, which is his alma mater. I think you would probably have more reason to not poach players, particularly one as important as Avery Johnson in that scenario, because it is your alma mater and you care more about it than if it was just a random school that you were leaving. But that's what I can give you on that. I just don't. People seem to be really fascinated by that story. I'm just kind of, I don't know. It didn't really strike my fancy all that much, especially with just there's so much else going on with the K-State sports world right now. So, I'm not out here trying to call anybody a liar or anything like that. I told you exactly what I did. I sent the link of that story and said, hey, what do you think of this? Like, was this legit? And the answer I got was basically like, I don't really think so. So that's what I have on the Colin Klein situation there. Brad, what's up, Brad? Thank you for being here, Brad. Brad says, don't let K-State do to Coach Tang what Baylor did to Art Briles, both great coaches and people, screwed by ignorant, woke leadership. Well, I mean, look, I wouldn't say that this has much to do with woke. If I were to guess, I would think Richard Linton probably falls on the opposite end of the woke spectrum. The similar case to this is unfortunately another one at K-State. It is Frank Martin. It is the Frank Martin case where John Curry did not like that he yelled and cursed as much as he did on the sideline. He started doing stuff like literally sitting behind him on the bench during games and taking notes. Did a lot of things to make Frank Martin's life very difficult. Oh, by the way, his university president at that time that was very much in support of this was Kirk Schultz. And they both got on Frank's nerves. And then the final straw was they found a receipt in a trash can that was supposedly a money wire from a old family friend back home in D.C. to Jamar Samuels, one of K-State's better players. They used that to suspend him for an NCAA tournament game that K-State then lost. And that was the final straw for Frank Martin. He said, peace, I'm out. And K-State ran off Frank Martin to South Carolina, an objectively worse basketball program. So that's happened once before. And yeah, I mean, it feels like I very, this is an educated opinion here. I very much doubt that if Richard Linton is still the president in April, that Jerome Tang is going to be the basketball coach at K-State. Feels to me like the toothpaste is out of the tube on that one. Can something be done between now and then? God, I hope so. More than anything almost in life, I hope so. But I don't know. I don't know. So it may well happen, Brad. It may well happen. Calico Willie. What's up, Calico Willie? Calico Willie says the same thing. Don't let K-State do Tang like Martin. Yeah. Unfortunately, Calico, as you can tell by what I just said, I am very much fearful of that. I do believe that through this, Trauma can kind of bond people. It sounds like the relationship between Gene Taylor and Jerome Tang is as strong as ever because they both had to deal with the unbelievable tyranny here of the president going on. I think in part a reason that Jerome Tang released that video was to help Gene Taylor potentially fight for his job. There has been a lot of talk about that behind the scenes, that Richard Linton had a mind to, if things were not calmed down, fire the reigning athletic director of the year in college athletics. If you want a little insight into where this thing has been over the last week in Manhattan. So anyway, yeah, I am hopeful that doesn't happen, Calico, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Snappy AJ, thank you, Snappy AJ, for some real legitimate hard data here to put a bow on the Pitt conversation in this chat. At least maybe. Snappy AJ says Medium has Pitt at 650K viewers per week in 2022 when they went 9-4. 7 in the Big 12 ahead of them, with TCU at 2.2 mil, OSU at 1.68, and to your point, K-State at 1.23 and Iowa State at 882K. There you go. Hail to Pitt. Hail to Pitt. Lower TV ratings by about 25%. We'll call it 20%. About 20% lower TV viewership than Iowa State, one of the two schools that was made fun of there, and about 45 to 50% less than K-State, the other school that was used as an example there. So sorry, Hail to Pitt. Sorry, Hail to Pitt. You paid $15 to get dunked on here the entire show, but I'm glad that Snappy AJ came through with another one here at the end. So Snappy AJ, that's good work, man. Hard for me to bust out a bunch of research while still talking here on the show. You took care of it and got it done for everybody, and we appreciate you for it. We appreciate you for it, my friend. Matthew says Louisville over Pitt for ACC leftovers in the Big 12. Yeah, hell yeah, of course. Pitt is just one of the most boring football basketball programs overall in the country to me. And look, I understand. I have plenty of self-awareness about what the national perception of K-State would be in a lot of corners. I understand that a lot of people would say the same thing about my school. Doesn't change the fact that Pitt to me moves the needle absolutely zero. I don't really care to watch Pitt football or basketball. Is DeJuan Blair walking through that door? Maybe if DeJuan Blair came walking through that door to play basketball for Pitt, then I would be a little bit more interested. But yeah, right now I'm just not. Daniel says, that was kind of how I felt about Tang's message too. I'm still worried about K-State's future. Yeah, I wish I had something better to tell you about that, Daniel, but I would still be very, very much worried about the future of Jerome Tang at K-State and K-State's future in general if you have a president like this that is operating the way that he did. So, and I will tell you, Daniel, when I first saw the Tang video, I was cautiously optimistic that was just something that he wanted to do, and completely just out of his own ideology and idea and where he wanted to move things. But then start talking to people, and unfortunately does not sound like that is really totally the case. Houston Cougars Germany. What's up, Houston Cougars Germany? Love that. Love getting some German flair into the chat here. Houston Cougars Germany says, go John Kurtz, go Juan. Yes, shout out to Juan. Juan, my guy as always. Go Big 12, go Coach Fritz, go Cougs, and go Washington versus Texas. Horns down. Says, apropos, the largest comeback in bowl history was Houston over Pitt, 35-34 in 2015. Thank you for that. Houston Cougars Germany. Everybody is getting in on the Pitt action here, man. If anybody, you got about a minute or two here before I get out of here. If anybody has one more last thing they'd like to dunk on Pitt with, you're welcome to submit it. Click the $ below the chat box in order to do so, to make that a super chat. But you guys have done a good job driving the point home here on Pitt. Houston Cougars Germany. From all the way from Germany, man. Pitt's taking shots from Germany. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the love for everybody. I will send a special shout out to Coach Fritz. Excited to see what he is going to be able to do at Houston. And thank you to Willie Fritz for coaching Michael Bishop at Blinn Junior College back in 1995 and 1996. Back-to-back unbeaten national championship seasons before he went on to be the greatest quarterback in K-State history. So I very much have a lot of love for Willie Fritz. Got a lot of love for you guys too. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. I think that is going to about wrap it up for me. Oh, I see Alpha Cat. Alpha Cat, I missed this one. Alpha Cat says Pitt versus Notre Dame didn't even get 2 mil this year. Boy, Notre Dame can't even drag Pitt across the finish line to 2 million viewers. So yeah, thank you, Alpha Cat. That's another good one. And is another good one. I don't know. Oh yeah, no, okay, it did show up for me. Alpha Cat with the Pitt Notre Dame did not even get to 2 million viewers this year. Thank you all for being here. Spread the word, friends, family, Facebook groups, Instagram, Twitter, X, Threads, wherever it is that you're on social media. Post about the channel, post the videos, let people know about it in your life. Let's continue to grow this channel. I appreciate all of you that have done that so far. It has been great. If you could like the video on the way out the door, I would much appreciate that. You can also support the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4. Leave a comment in the comment section. Agree with me, disagree with me, love me, hate me. All of that stuff helps. If you're a Pitt fan, you want to defend your honor, comment section is where you can do that. So please help out with that good old YouTube algorithm as you exit. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you as always, and I will talk to you soon. Enjoy the start of your week.